So I'm going to use Genomics England as the case study, and I'm going to move on to talk about some of those other items on the agenda, like newborn screening and the RTLP, but you'll really have the deep dive later in the agenda. So the first thing to note is, due to a lot of our history, we have really deep and broad scientific expertise. You know, we obviously had the discovery of the double helix. I mean, John would say we didn't do very much with it. I think we did a little bit with the human genome. But British scientists have long been at the forefront of genomic science. That remains true today. We have had, and this started with really David and John, huge vision driven by leadership in government, which has been sustained over the long term. And in particular, they took an early decision to invest heavily and over the long term in national genomic infrastructure. And this has been critical. The 100,000 Genome Project was launched as early as 2013, and this has revolutionized our opportunities here. You know, since then, we've had about 11 science ministers, almost as many finance ministers. We've had to make the case for the health economic, the actual economic case for delivering into the healthcare system, but we have made and we have won that case with each and every one of them. And that is why, even with a change of government, this remains, genomics and precision medicine remains a political and a clinical priority. And this is why we have been able to leverage what is a particular UK strength, which is our integrated data and healthcare system. And this is the reason that the 100,000 Genomes Project was fundamentally different to other projects like it. We drove genomic discovery into the heart of the clinic for patient benefit. You can see here, it was a genuinely population-level study. It created huge amounts of data involving patients, the NHS, and genomic centres from across the system. To give you a sense of scale, just sequencing one person's genome creates the equivalent level of data as the average laptop. Now, recruitment from this cohort finished in 2018. I think most of us know that. But with analysis ongoing, the diagnostic yield is somewhere in the region of 30% for rare diseases, up to 60% for cystic renal disease. But each one of those individual cases is obviously a life changed, as we heard from David. This is one of our earliest cases, Jessica. She received a diagnosis through the 100,000, and as you can see, it was only through sequencing that she and her family discovered she had GLUT1 deficiency syndrome. It was caused by a deletion in one copy of the SLC2A1 gene. Now, this is obviously a rare disease. It affects about 500 people worldwide. It can be managed with a personalized ketogenic diet to reduce her seizures. Now, that's an extraordinary outcome. Not every patient gets an outcome like that, but it is the extraordinary power of genomics to transform lives. Now, today, at NHS England, at Genomics England, working with the NHS, we deliver the world's first nationwide whole genome sequencing service for 190 clinical conditions across rare disease and cancers. We've supported over 100,000 patients since its launch, and we're scaling all the time, increasing clinical indications, but also patients. And the most important part of this is that we link our research platform to the evidence to provide better care. So since 2021, we've added over 4,000 new links between genes and conditions to our analyses. So that means that through having that data platform and having researchers actively involved in the platform, we're providing better care into the NHS. So Genomics England's structure, it's inherently translational by design. We are able to deliver that mission of improving NHS care through active involvement and driving innovation into the NHS as a whole. Now, we know, of course, that genomic data is only useful when it's tightly associated with other modalities, so clinical data, imaging, pathology. So we invest heavily all the time in improving the quality, but also the linkage with other data sets. So we've tripled the size of the National Genomic Research Library since 2021. We're continuing to grow that all the time because we have an extraordinary level of consent from the NHS clinical participants, over 90%. And that will continue as we continue to scale, obviously, the clinical engagement. So that's why, as you can see here, we have over 600 active projects underway in the research environment, over 1,800 approved researchers. They represent 300 institutions worldwide and 7 out of 10 major pharmas by market cap working with the data. It's because of the quality and the strength and the continual growth of that data set, which will, of course, work with Oxford-Harrington to underpin that discovery. And we see the clinical and research impact all the time. Dr. Jack Bartram, who's a consultant pediatric hematologist at Great Ormond Street, researched exactly how whole genome sequencing would impact his routine clinical practice. And he found that whole genome sequencing provided additional information for diagnosis in 81% of cases. It changed the management of the condition in 24% of cases, and it reclassified diagnosis in 14% of cases. Baby Oliver, who you can see here, with Amanda Pritchard, Chief Executive of the NHS, was born with a 6-centimetre tumour on his leg. Under the microscope, this just looked like infantile fibrosarcoma. Standard molecular tests were inconclusive. With whole genome sequencing, we were able to confirm that it was a benign myofibroma. Baby Oliver was spared chemo and surgery. Now, that's a really big outcome for a newborn baby. So the Genomics England story, which started with you two, is a great example of how the UK ecosystem with an integrated healthcare system and data capabilities can leverage the national scale and the interconnectedness of the NHS and deliver real outcomes for patients, but also change the state of research. But this doesn't happen in a bubble. As we've already heard from John and David, the government has to be proactive in enabling innovation with long-term targeted investments to ensure that we can deliver this, and we also need to keep the pedal on regulatory reforms. So we've had obviously the Life Sciences Vision, which has created a more joined-up regulatory commissioning and commercial environment, and this is designed specifically to smooth pathways for breakthrough therapies, particularly rare diseases. I've set out a few of the investment commitments. These are just since 2021, and they go all the way up to a recent Labour investment, which has been announced since the new government has come into power less than 100 days ago. Now, the MHRA is obviously critical to this effort. They see themselves as an enabling regulator, particularly led by the current Chief Executive, June Rain, who is very accessible and engaged. And they've produced several measures to support innovation, particularly simplifying clinical trials approvals, reducing the time taken for those approvals to reduce time to get to patient. They've introduced the AI airlock, which some of you may have heard about, in order to improve the use of AI for the development of new therapies and the regulation of medicines. This is still in the development phase, but I think we should encourage it, as the UK has a particular capability in AI. They're also, which is relevant for this, embracing point-of-care manufacturing, allowing for the creation of personalised medicines in real time, tailored to the needs of individualised patients. And alongside the regulatory reforms, of course, we have to look to NICE, because without reimbursement, of course, medicine does not get to patients. So about 80% of advanced therapies have been approved by NICE in recent years. There is support for groundbreaking treatments, but it needs to go further, especially the more individualised you get. Most recently, of course, the CRISPR gene editing technology for beta thalassemia was approved, which does show that there is support for these kinds of technologies. That went through the Innovative Medicines Fund, so there do need to be more routes for this, but it is a step in the right direction. And we do need to look also to the work that they've been doing with real-world evidence, which is critical with rare cohorts. 65% of NICE's decisions have now incorporated real-world evidence, including using it as primary outcome data. So things are going in the right direction, but there still is some way to go with the sorts of technologies that we are talking about. So this is why both major parties, and I believe that there is cross-party consensus on this, have demonstrated commitment to life sciences. And as you can see some of the figures here, they are putting their money where their mouth is, but we can always do with more in order to accelerate the process. The new Labour government have signalled in the first 100 days ongoing commitment to the current life sciences strategy, but a lot needs to be bottomed out in this. Just in the last month, they announced the clinical trials funding. 400 million of that 521 was to accelerate clinical trials, and they've indicated that that, along with data infrastructure, is a core priority for them, along with medicines manufacturing. So for the meeting today, that is positive news, because of course this could not be more urgent. As David mentioned, 75% of rare diseases are children, 30% do not live past their 5th birthday. Every day, 9 babies in the UK are born with a rare genetic condition that could be treated, prevented, or even cured if it had been diagnosed as a newborn. And even the average time to diagnosis in the UK is still 67 appointments over 75 months. That is just simply too long. So this is why at Genomics England, working with our partners, we've set up the Generation Study. It's to sequence the genomes of 100,000 newborn babies to develop the evidence on the use of genomics as routine at birth. This is to just eradicate the diagnostic odyssey and make it possible to give the right therapeutic at the right time. This is an exemplar for the move to preventative care by screening for more than 200 severe treatable childhood conditions, to do more for those thousands of babies born every year with these conditions who just slip through the cracks at the moment. But again, as has been mentioned, diagnosis is not enough. Some of our participants, such as Alex, he was undiagnosed for 18 years. He had serious symptoms. He required 28 operations, removal of tumours, several bouts of heart surgery. He was eventually sequenced as part of the 100,000. He had Leopard syndrome. So his diagnosis didn't come with a silver bullet treatment or a big improvement. He and his family were, actually delighted to have a diagnosis finally. It meant they could go into a care pathway. We hear that a lot. They were also incredibly supportive that they could contribute to research. But nevertheless, a diagnosis without a therapeutic does not take you where we need to be going for rare disease patients. We know only 5% of rare conditions have an approved treatment. Unless we change the paradigm, at this rate, it will take 2,000 years until treatments are available for all. This is why we launched the Rare Therapies Launchpad. It's been co-developed by a number of the participants here. These include, obviously, the Oxford-Harrington, the MHRA, the ABPI, Mila's Miracle Foundation, Genomics England, and many other participants who will work on the ground. And it aims to do what it says on the slide, but the purpose is to develop novel medicines development and access pathway for children with rare conditions, to tackle some of those really knotty issues which we all know too well. It will initially focus on very small numbers of children with fatal and life-threatening brain conditions using ASOs. During this multi-year pilot, real-life experience and human data is going to help us to determine the barriers and the opportunities. And key amongst these will be rethinking where oversight is needed, defining the principles of proportionate regulation, a model which can be applied more widely across conditions and treatment modalities. And really, as we've heard already so eloquently in the opening, by leveraging the strengths of the UK's genomic and life sciences ecosystem, where we've established so much groundwork and so much expertise already, the ultimate goal here is to create a new sustainable and scalable pathway from early diagnosis to treatment, monitoring and reimbursement that will then be applicable for all appropriate patients. Now, this sounds like a lofty goal, but given the groundwork which you've achieved and the pathway which you saw that took us from a dream through the foundation of Genomics England, which had so many challenges, to a scalable genomic whole genome sequencing service, which is available at scale now, I know that we can do this. And this is something which rare diseases patients deserve. It is a future which should be here now, but it can be here soon, and the UK really is the place that we can get this done. Thank you.